It wasn't the details of the illegal abortions. The prosecution decided they needed to distinguish between good abortions and bad abortions, that there was a good abortion and then there was the bad things that Gosnell did. So they got an abortion doctor, an experienced abortion doctor, to give evidence about a good abortion. And they said to him, so how to establish his expertise, how many abortions have you done? And he just said to the jury, 40,000. And the jury gasped.
We're only going to play a little bit of this. Very powerful testimony of somebody who survived an abortion, who was born alive. And her testimony resulted in the Infants Born Alive law passed in 2002. They later strengthened that because that still allowed partial birth abortion. If you weren't fully separated from the mother, they could still come after you, could still kill you. And so then they passed the Partial Birth Abortion Act in 2003, and then they fought it. The left fought this, the murder of innocent children. They fought that for another 4 years in the courts until finally, in a very narrow Supreme Court decision, 5-4, they upheld the partial birth abortion ban. Of course, it's something that Bill Clinton fought against as well. It was something that's put in by George W. Bush. I want you to hear from a baby who now can tell you a little bit about the circumstances that were done against her. And then we're going to talk to Phelim McAleer about someone who made his living, quite a lot of money, killing babies like this. Here's her story.
I'm adopted, and my biological mother was 17, and so was my biological father. She was 7.5 months pregnant when she decided to go to Planned Parenthood, which is the largest abortion provider in the world, and they counseled her to have a late-term saline abortion, which is a saline salt solution that is injected into the mother's womb. The baby gulps that solution, it burns the baby inside and out, and then she is to deliver a dead baby within 24 hours. And to everyone's great shock and surprise, I didn't arrive dead but alive on April the 6th, 1977 in a Los Angeles County abortion clinic. What's fantastic about this, about the perfect timing of my arrival, is that the abortionist was not on duty yet. So he wasn't even given the opportunity to continue on with his plan for my life, which was death. And I know that I am in a government building, and a beautiful one it is, and I love your country as well as my own. But I know in the age that we live in, it is not at all politically correct to say the name of Jesus Christ in places like this. To bring him into these sorts of meetings because his name can make people so terribly uncomfortable. But I didn't survive so I could make everyone comfortable. I survived so I could stir things up a bit. And I have a great time doing it. And so I was delivered alive, as I've already said, after 18 hours. I should be blind, I should be burned, I should be dead. And yet I'm not. You know what is fantastic vindication is the fact that the abortionist had to sign my birth certificate. So I know who he is. And it also says, for any skeptic listening, on my medical records, born during saline abortion. Ha! They didn't win. I've done some research on the man that performed the abortion on me. And his clinics are the largest chain of clinics in the United States of America, and they gross $70 million a year. I read a quote from him at some point several years ago, and he said, "I have aborted over 1 million babies, and I consider it my passion." I tell you these things because, listen, ladies and gentlemen, we are in an interesting battle, whether we realize it or not, in this world. It is a battle between life and death. What side are you on?
Absolutely. What side are you on? And as she said, it was his passion. And of course, Kermit Gosnell, not the man who tried to kill her, kept feet of babies as a souvenir. I mean, it was his passion. He made a lot of money off of this as well. Joining us now is Phelim McAleer. He began his career in journalism covering the Northern Ireland Troubles. He was a foreign correspondent for the Financial Times. He also covered Romania and Bulgaria for The Economist. Before that, he covered Ireland for the UK Sunday Times. And his latest investigative project focuses on Kermit Gosnell. He produced the Gosnell movie, which he and his wife financed by running a massive crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo. It's one of the most successful Indiegogo campaigns in history. Over 26,500 people funded the film, contributed $2.25 million in 45 days. As of now, the project has raised over $2.34 million from 29,000 people. They've produced a film with Dean Cain of Lois and Clark. He played Superman in Lois and Clark, and yet Hollywood, surprisingly, doesn't want to produce this because, see, this is a film that will make you uncomfortable. Just like she said, her mission in life, that Gianna Jessen, who just heard, her mission in life is to make people uncomfortable. This book will make you uncomfortable. That's why the New York Times doesn't want to put it on their top-selling list, even though it's the fourth best-selling hardcover nonfiction title in the country. They don't want you to be uncomfortable about the truth, and this is the untold story of America's most prolific serial killer. Thank you so much for joining us, Phelim.
Thank you for having me on. It's a great story, and I'm really pleased that I can bring it to your people.
Well, now you've spent 3 years investigating this. What was the most astonishing thing that you found about it? Because as I look at these details, every time I read something about it, and I haven't had a chance to read your book yet, it's just absolutely breathtaking what this guy does. The conditions of the place, the souvenirs of the baby parts that he kept. What was the most amazing thing that you found?
Well, I mean, I was talking to someone last night who has read the book or is reading the book, and they said, the thing about this story is you read something, you go, my God, it can't get any worse, and then you flick forward a few pages, and it's like, oh, it's even worse now. This is a man who ran a house of horrors. He murdered live babies. He murdered women. He's America's biggest serial killer. He kept trophies. He cut the feet of babies, put them in jars, labeled them. He took pictures of women's genitalia, collected those. His chief anesthesiologist was a 15-year-old girl. He had cats in the clinic. There was cat feces everywhere. He had food during abortion procedures. It was just, his staff were drug addicts. That was all shocking, that America's biggest serial killer, that his clinic wasn't inspected for 18 years, despite massive state regulation, but it was just ignored because he was an abortionist. So
yeah, exactly.
That's shocking. That's shocking, right? But I mean, I think one of the things that shocked me was what a legal abortion is like and what the legal law in America is about abortion, that you can have an abortion up to 9 months. I didn't know that. I didn't know the details of a legal abortion either. So a lot of shocks, both about legal and illegal.
Yeah, and when I hear this testimony of Gianna Jessen, it was not something that in my personal life I had ever been involved with. I never thought about it until there was the debate about partial birth abortion. And when I realized that they could take a full-term baby and it was perfectly legal for them to, as long as one tiny part of the baby, the top of the head, remained in the woman's body, they could murder that fully formed baby who is fully capable of living on its own. And that completely, for me, changed my approach to this. I realized at that point, this was no longer an issue of, well, at what point does life begin in conception? No, these people were fully supporting murder of mature babies. And then I understood. And then the scales came off of my eyes, so to speak, and I saw it for what it was. Well,
very interesting. That happened to you then. I mean, for us, it was a very recent thing. We started covering this just as journalists, as a great crime story. Then we discovered, as you say, just what this this procedure is and what it involves. And I mean, it's very interesting, right? So it's the most horrific trial I've ever covered as a journalist. But there was only one incident when the jury gasped, when the jury made an audible noise.
Hang on to that. We're gonna leave that as a cliffhanger. We've got to take a break, and that's gonna be a great cliffhanger for people to hang on through the break. We're gonna be right back with Phelim McAleer, author of Gosnell, The Untold Story of America's Most Prolific Serial Killer. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Phelim McAleer. He is one of the authors of Gosnell, The Untold Story of America's Most Prolific Serial Killer. Of course, it's about Kermit Gosnell, who is serving a life sentence in prison as an abortionist, no possibility of parole. What did he do? And, of course, this is a best-selling book. It's the fourth best-selling hardback cover in the book. It sold out in 3 days, and yet it is not going to be put on the New York Times bestseller list. They're trying to get a distributor for their film, and Hollywood is not interested in it. So what do we see? We see that when they can't win the argument, when there's very compelling evidence that opposes their point of view, and that is that abortion is just a medical procedure, it's an element of choice. And, of course, they don't want to extend choice to us in anything else in our children's lives when it comes to their education or anything else. But, of course, whether or not you want to kill your children, that should be your choice. They try to suppress this. But we want to talk to him about the details of this, give you information as to where to buy it. And, of course, you can find it at gosnellbook.com. You can get a copy there, and we are going to get that film out. I know one way or the other, Phelim, you're going to get that film out. But we went to break on a cliffhanger, you said, as they were talking about these unbelievable details in this particular case. One thing in particular made the jury gasp. What was that?
It wasn't the details of the illegal abortions. The prosecution decided they needed to distinguish between good abortions and bad abortions, that there was a good abortion and then there was the bad things that Gosnell did. So they got an abortion doctor, an experienced abortion doctor, to give evidence about a good abortion. And they said to him, so how to establish his expertise, how many abortions have you done? And he just said to the jury, 40,000. And the jury gasped. The jury were shocked. And then when they described the details of a legal abortion, the jury became visibly uncomfortable. They didn't become uncomfortable when they saw the photographs of the dead babies, because that was evidence, and I don't know, they must have expected that. It was the shocking details of the real abortions that was for them was the thing that changed their minds and made them think again.
And that's why when you have demonstrations, and again, a demonstration is to demonstrate, to show, to talk to people about an issue that you have a grievance about, right? They do not want to have, under any circumstances, pictures of aborted babies. They don't want people to know what the procedure is. And as you point out, when they gasped when they heard that he committed 40,000 legal abortions, talking about the good legal abortions, what people don't realize is that we have the number of children that are killed in the United States on a daily basis is like the number of people who died on 9/11, where it's like a 9/11 every day that we've had since Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, that was the thing that shocked the jury as well. Actually, it's the industrial scale of it. I mean, I was speaking to a reporter and I was telling him that story, and he goes, "I don't think I've done 40,000 of anything in my life." You know.
Yeah, really?
We haven't, but it's possible to do 40,000 abortions. And, remember that when abortions were supposed to be safe, legal, and rare? I think, I see that your Twitter handle is libertarian. Is that correct?
Libertarian, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of libertarians are pro-abortion. You know that. And I think you said you weren't particularly interested in the topic either until you found out exactly what it was.
That's right.
It's very easy to think of abortion. One thing I know about this book is that Planned Parenthood are geniuses. They made me not realize what abortion was, and I'm a journalist. I've literally been around the world. I've worked everywhere. I've worked in several countries all over the world. I know things, but I never knew what abortion was until I started investigating this story, just like you didn't know until you started investigating. And then, as you say, the scales fell from your eyes.
They keep it secret. And that's why people need to read this book. And it's why it's so important for you to get a film out there, because you're going to reach a certain class of people with a book. You're going to reach a different class of people with a film. And you're going to get to them on a visceral level. And this is a visceral subject. This is something that people need to understand. Some people aren't going to read the book. So it's very important to get this film out. I want to talk about that. But you also spoke directly with Kermit Gosnell in prison, didn't you?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, but he's a sociopath, I suppose. And I think in modern America, if you want to be a serial killer, which he was, the best place to be is in an abortion clinic, because you have the appearance of being heavily regulated, of the big government, big brother on top of you. But behind closed doors, it doesn't matter. Nobody's interested. No, there was not one government inspector came through that door of his abortion clinic for 17 years. So
wow.
we met him, and hello.
Wow, we'll talk about that on the other side of this break. That's amazing. Not one inspector in 17 years. How is that helping women's health? That's the big lie that they put over. That's the beard that they use to cover this horrendous practice that resulted in the death of at least 2 adult women. Maybe it's more. You've got more of the details about that than I do. We'll be right back with Phelim McAleer talking about Kermit Gosnell, the greatest serial killer we've had. Going back to Phelim McAleer, as we were going to break, you were talking about interviewing Kermit Gosnell in prison. You know, I was interested when I looked at one of the articles about your book and some of the details that were uncovered in this raid with Kermit Gosnell. He continued to do an abortion as they were raiding him the first time. And it said, unfazed by the presence of the FBI, he proceeded to continue the abortion in the middle of the raid. And then when he was done, he just sat down with investigators and ate dinner while he still had the bloody garments on. He showed absolutely no remorse. And of course, they talk about how filthy the conditions were there. He had at least 2 adults who died because of the filthy conditions in his clinic. But he had absolutely no remorse as he was doing this, talking to the FBI agents. Did he show any remorse when you talked to him in prison?
Yeah. No remorse at all. He's innocent. History will vindicate him. Now, he's innocent, but he lies a lot. And, you know, he lies and he thinks he can get away with it. But what was very interesting was we know the story very well, so we were able to pick up on those lies. But, I mean, you talk about that, him doing the abortion whilst the FBI was there, and there was a stand-up row between the cops and the Department of Health bureaucrats who allowed him to do the abortion. And the cops said, you can't allow him to do the abortion. He's a suspect in all these cases. And they were going, no. And they were going to take the woman to the hospital. And they were going, no. So a cop with common sense had more intelligence than a bureaucrat nurse, a public health provider. She's been
anesthetized to this issue, just like you say. You know, we can't believe that. How many people do 40,000 of anything? You know, the jury was aghast when they said that. She's been anesthetized to this, but you have an ordinary person who looks at this and just cannot believe what is going on. That's why your book is so important. People need to understand what is going on with abortion. Yeah,
it's amazing, and thing people don't understand, and you know, it's actually, and there was this row between the cop and the nurse, and she was going, you're just saying that because you're a cop. And he's going, no, I'm saying it because I'm a human being. Then they witnessed him come in with his bloody gloves, and it was salmon teriyaki, a seasoned FBI agent and a seasoned cop, and he started eating with chopsticks the salmon teriyaki with the bloody hands, I guess. And the cop, the FBI agent, gave evidence in court under oath, said, I have never eaten salmon since. I cannot physically eat salmon since.
That's absolutely amazing. And of course, it was an undercover narcotics investigator named Jim Wood who broke this. This wasn't something that was coming from the health department. It wasn't coming from the medical inspectors. They're perfectly fine with this, as you pointed out. Now, let's show what a legitimate abortion is, and then we'll show you how what he did was different from a legitimate abortion. And people just can't believe what a legitimate abortion is because of the ignorance, and they maintain this silence. They maintain this beard that this is for women's health.
Yeah, I mean, when Jim Wood went into the abortion clinic, you know, he saw things. He saw the condition of Gosnell kept baby feet in jars, and Jim Wood turned to his colleague and said, "Is this normal?" And the guy says, "I don't know what's normal in an abortion clinic." And I think that's a very telling comment. People don't know what goes on behind these closed doors. There are laws. People don't even know what the laws are. Yeah, there are the feet, you know, and.
Well, that brings up a criticism of the left. They say, you know, don't judge the abortion industry on Kermit Gosnell. He's not typical of what's going on. Is he typical of what's going on?
Very interesting. So our book we do not go into that because we had no evidence of that, and we're journalists. We're not pro-life activists. We're journalists, and we can only go where the facts take us and no further. But after the book was published about a month ago, there was a congressional report into the Planned Parenthood videos, actually. But they expanded that investigation, and they looked at abortion practitioners, and they found an abortion practitioner in Texas who they don't name in Dallas, and they interviewed and subpoenaed staff and members of people who work for him and patients, and it's just like Kermit Gosnell all over again. Unqualified staff killing babies after they're born, filthy conditions, shocking stuff, shocking. And for us, we realized, my God, there's another Kermit Gosnell in Texas, and then we have heard comments that there's another Kermit Gosnell in Delaware. There's one in New Orleans. So let's not judge. Let's not judge Kermit Gosnell's illegality as a rogue. Let's look at all the rest of them. But actually, I think people need to read this book to find out what goes on under the law as well. And once they know that, make up your mind. But don't believe the propaganda. This is a clump of cells. It's safe. It's legal. It's rare. It's not. And if you're happy with that, that's fine. But I think you should know the facts. You owe it to yourself to have the facts.
Now, when we began this hour, I played that piece from Gianna Jessen. She's now an adult. She went through a very, very difficult period throughout her life of trying to go through physical rehabilitation for the damage that was done to her. But she survived. And part of her testimony was responsible for getting the infant born alive law passed in 2002, and then the partial birth abortion the law that followed up after that. Now, Kermit Gosnell, if I understand correctly, was he sent to jail because he killed infants who were born alive in violation of that law that was passed?
Yes. Yeah. He was convicted of capital murder. Capital murder. He did a deal with the prosecution that he wouldn't get the death penalty if he agreed not to appeal his conviction and sentencing. He immediately appealed his conviction and sentencing after he got life without parole. But yes, he was convicted of murdering live babies who were born alive.
And see, that's the thing that I just can't get my head around, that you could see a child that was born alive and that you could murder it. I remember the testimony of a surgeon who had to commit essentially abortions because they were ectopic pregnancies. They were not going to be able to go full term, and it was so they would pull. He said he would pull the baby out, and because of how it was developing, it was going to die, and it was going to create a health problem for the mother. And he said, I would hold this teeny tiny miniature human in the palm of my hand, and it was moving around, and it was alive and everything. And he goes, and I would snip the cord, and it would turn into like a little tiny piece of plastic. And that's what you see in the jars. That's why people don't have any empathy for this, because they see this, it's very small. It's got all the details there. The fingerprints are there, the everything, except that it's really small and it doesn't look real because it's dead. And yet this is something that Kermit Gosnell, when he delivered these children born alive on the table, he would murder them, and they're not a tiny, they're not tiny that fits in the palm of his hand. I mean, this is a regular baby that can survive, and he had the cold-blooded mentality that he could just murder that child. Yeah, no,
the witnesses said the babies. Yeah, you've got that up there. Baby, he joked, this baby is big enough to walk me to the bus stop. That's baby boy A.
Wow.
It was so shocking that 3 members of staff took a separate photograph of that baby. He was put in a shoebox. His arms and legs were hanging over the shoebox. When he was touched, he curled up like a fetal position. One of the witnesses actually stood up in court and curled up like this, in a kind of fetal position. This was a living, breathing human being with a personality, and Kermit Gosnell killed him with a pair of scissors.
Absolutely, absolutely amazing. And I think one of the things, it's very important. I've always said to my wife, I said, I think that the people are going to change their minds when we have the capability of showing what we now call 4D sonograms, where they can see movies of babies inside the mother. And we've seen very detailed movies of dolphins, of elephants, of dogs inside their mothers. And National Geographic will run that and say, isn't this fascinating? Look at the detail. They're just like miniature, fully developed, but they won't do that with the babies. And yet when people do see these movies, I think that is a very compelling thing. I think the technology, the truth of your book and the film that you're trying to put out there, as people realize what this is, they will recoil in horror at the truth and say, how could we have allowed this to happen and go on for so long to so many people?
Yeah, that's why the New York Times has suppressed this book and won't put it on its bestsellers list, even though we are a bestseller in terms of sales. That's why they're suppressing it, because once people get to know the truth, they'll go, well, we don't want any part of that, and that cannot be allowed to happen. So I want your listeners and your viewers to go out and please buy the book, not just for me, but for the truth, but also to screw with the New York Times. We want to embarrass them. I'm from Northern Ireland. Sorry, I'm small. I'm petty. I'm from Northern Ireland. I'm aggressive. I don't like being told what to do or being the establishment screwing with me. So I want you, please, as a favour to this little Northern Ireland man who's really angry at the moment, go to this book, buy this book, because the best New York Times bestseller list is a fake list in a fake newspaper full of fake journalists, full of fake people who pretend to be concerned about fake things. And
I think
that's
there's
the
a very
only F word I'm going to use. When we go off air, I'll use a few more F words. It won't be fake, but at the moment...
4-letter F words, yeah. Right now we'll stick to fake, because that's what they have done. That's what the mainstream media has been able to do on every issue. They come out and they decide what will be covered.
Yeah.
And they can do it because they're all on the same page, or they can do it as a conspiracy of silence. And we've seen this on one issue after the other. This is yet another example of how they do that on a wide variety of issues. And when there were only a few national papers, when there were only 3 or 4 national television stations, they would all cover the same news, reading off of the same script. And so people didn't even know there were these other points of views out there. They didn't even know there were these other stories that weren't being covered. That's one way that you suppress the news. And of course, your bias is shown in what you cover, not only in what you say about what you cover, but it's what you choose to cover. And so that's the conspiracy of silence that the New York Times is trying to pull on your book right now. Sold out at Amazon in just 3 days, 4th best-selling list, but they won't even put it on their New York Times bestseller list. Absolutely amazing. I want to see the movie that you're doing that set a record on Indiegogo. You got $2.25 million in just 45 days. You've already filmed that, right?
Yeah, and many of them were your viewers who sent us money. We know that because we communicate with them a lot. The movie's great. We've had a couple of sneak screenings for people. Dean Kane's in it. It's had embarrassing focus group returns. We had 98% approval ratings. It's like we're a communist dictator running an election. 98% 5-star reviews. It's the same on the book, actually. We've had 99% 5-star reviews. I think we had one star and 2 4 stars or something. So it's a fascinating story. It's a fascinating story, and people really appreciate the truth. And it's not written by pro-life activists, and I think people appreciate that. It's written by journalists. It's not an activist; it's a journalist.
And you've had a long experience of doing this, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I also want to tell people, when you get this distribution, and I'm sure that you will get distribution, you will see if you go on to if you go on IMDb, or if you go on to Rotten Tomatoes or some of the sites that look at the reviews, and you'll see reviews done by audiences, and then you'll see reviews done by critics. And when you see a movie that gets a 98% review approval by the audiences and a 2% review by the critics, is going to be a film like yours. Don't be turned off by that. You'll probably will enjoy that. That is a political restatement by the critics.
That's the movie to go to.
That's right.
The movie to go to. The bigger the divide between the critics and the public, that's where you got to go. It's when it's the other way around. The critics love it and the public hate it. Avoid like the plague. Look.
Well, I know you'll get distribution of this, especially if you do it in selected release. And they're going to see that you get a big per-screen return, and that's the way these films always have to proceed. And there's some very good films out there, but they will always be trashed. They'll always be censored by the New York Times, by the same critics who are out there. Let's talk about how this actually unraveled, because as you pointed out, for 17 years, there was no inspection from the people who should have been looking at the conditions of his clinic. How did this case get broken? How did they bring him to justice?
Well, bizarrely, it's like a Hollywood movie, actually. I know that maybe some of your listeners might not have very friendly relationships with police officers. I mean, I think there's always healthy tension between law and order and citizens, and that's good. But this is a hero cop.
Mm-hmm.
This is a hero cop. This is a drugs cop Gosnell was so greedy that he was selling prescription drugs. He was one of Philadelphia's biggest supplier of legal prescription drugs.
Interesting.
And the cop.
So he had that business on the side as well.
Oh yeah, listen, he was quite the capitalist, quite the entrepreneur. God bless him. Yeah. So he was a hard worker. I'll give him that.
Or just greedy. Yeah. So he was selling drugs on the side, and he got busted by a guy who's like DEA, and he couldn't believe, I guess, the horror when he saw the abortion stuff. Because, that's one of the things, Phelim, when we look at the drug war, a lot of people look at things that are vice, and there's so much corruption because a lot of times, cops will look at the other way for vice and say, well, they're just hurting themselves. But those same cops, if they see a heinous murder, they're not going to look the other way on that, will they? Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Phelim McAleer. His book, Gosnell, The Untold Story of America's Most Prolific Serial Killer. You can find that at Gosnell, that's 2 L's, gosnellbook.com. As we lost him on Skype at the end of the last segment, he was about to tell us how an undercover narcotics investigation, because this abortionist, Kermit Gosnell, was selling illegal prescription drugs to people. So as part of that investigation, somebody who was not anesthetized to the horror of abortion saw this stuff there. Tell us about what happened then, Phelim, when this cop walks in off the street investigating drugs and sees what's going on at Kermit Gosnell's clinic.
It's very interesting. You talk about anesthetized. 3 years previously, someone told Homicide this was happening. Homicide did a cursory investigation, didn't look any further, closed the case. This cop was told, he interviewed a member of staff. She said it's chaos in there, and she said, and there was this woman died, an Asian woman, and he put the Asian woman's name into his computer, into his police computer, and he saw no police report. And he was shocked by this, because even if I break my arm and I'm taken to hospital, there's a police report about it, because that's just a little police notification. And so he then realized that this Bhutanese refugee, this woman who had no one to defend her or no one to investigate her death had gone unreported and uninvestigated, and he decided to be her champion. He decided that he was going to find out what happened to her, and he was going to investigate. And he got a lot of pushback again from the abortion establishment, the political establishment in Philadelphia, and from the homicide department, who said, "You're a narcotics cop. We're the big boys, the homicide. Stay out of this woman's death." He said no.
Wow.
And he's a hero.
Right now, there were numerous state government agencies, and this went all the way up to the governor, didn't it? The
governor was Kermit Gosnell's biggest enabler. Before a Republican Tom Ridge ran for governor in 1995, and back then the conventional wisdom was that to be a Republican to win Pennsylvania, you had to be nice, and you had to be moderate, and you had to be liberal. I think that was disproven in the last election, but then that was conventional wisdom. So Tom Ridge ran as a pro-choice Republican, and he said, when I get in, we're going to stop all inspections of abortion clinics. He got elected. They stopped all inspections of abortion clinics, and no government investigator crossed the threshold of that clinic until for 17 years, until this drug cop went in.
Well, see, that's very important, because here in Texas, when they passed a law that said, look, if you don't pass certain, qualifications that we're going to have for a women's health clinic, like we'll be able to get gurneys through the halls in case something happens, we're going to have inspections to make sure that things are clean. They say, oh, you're just trying to shut down our right to choose. And so what we have here is legalized murder with immunity, because it's political.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Texas law was about Kermit Gosnell, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the judge, said, "Oh no, Gosnell's just a rogue practitioner." He's not. He's not. And if you want to be a serial killer, become an abortionist. It's the biggest hands off. It's the biggest access to women. It's the biggest access to people that you can kill. Kermit Gosnell is not alone. the regulations don't seem to make any difference, especially in places where there's no political will to enforce those regulations. I mean, the abortion industry is the classic example of how more regulation doesn't mean more safety. In fact, it means less safety.
If you were concerned about women's health, you would want to have inspections. You would want to have halls that were wide enough that you could run a gurney through there to get somebody out in case there was an emergency. And if they had inspections at Kermit Gosnell, they would have seen the cats casually roaming the clinic. Yes. And when they pointed that out to him during the FBI raid, he said, hey, they kill a lot of mice. It's not supposed to be, that's supposed to be a recommendation for having cats roam the halls. Thank you so much. We're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, Phelim McAleer. The book.
Within the span of 7 days, there were 2 marches in Washington, the Women's March and the March for Life. The Women's March was a display of vulgarity, obscenity, and just downright meanness.
But just a lot of people were kind of being physical. We have a pregnant woman with us, and she was pushed. And people are, yelling in our faces and giving us the middle finger. So the marshals kind of had to come out and protect us.
The March for Life is peaceful, prayerful, and respectful. But don't take my word for it. We're going to make a comparison to see what people thought, what they said, and how they reacted. When does human life begin?
I think...
It's like the most annoying thing.
Do you know the answer to that scientifically?
No.
I don't know the answer to that. I believe that it begins at some point when the fetus can live viably outside the womb.
When would you say life begins?
I don't think it is about determining when life begins. I think it's just a very personal, painful choice that, every woman has to make, and I don't think a government should make it. I don't think another individual should make it.
I mean, Catholics would say that a life begins at conception, right? But I think a life begins when someone's able to take care of it in the world.
Okay, when does life begin?
Conception. Conception, no exception.
Conception.
When does life begin?
At conception. In the womb.
Life begins at conception.
At conception. At conception. At conception.
Do you believe in God?
I surely do.
What is the 5th commandment?
Thou shalt not kill.
What does abortion do?
I believe abortion kills, but I also, again, my faith canon is not the same as other people.
Can you tell me what the 5th commandment is?
Wait, go, quick. Well, let's see, love your mother, honor your father.
You did mention that you were Catholic. You're Catholic?
Born and raised, baby, born and raised.
Are you a faithful Catholic?
I am so not.
You were raised Catholic?
I was, indeed.
How do you square abortion with the 5th commandment?
The 5th commandment. Well, that just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Second question is, what is the 5th commandment?
You shall not kill.
The 5th commandment, thou shalt not kill.
Thou shalt not kill.
Does that include the elderly?
It includes any innocent human life.
Legislation was passed here in Washington, D.C. to legalize euthanasia, the killing of the elderly. What is your opinion on euthanasia?
It's just as strong as my opinion against abortion. Life is life, no matter which end of the spectrum you're at.
I'm Catholic, and our stance is protecting life from conception until natural death. So.
But I do have the relative, in fact, that I took care of, who is completely checked out. His Alzheimer's is at the final stages. If the laws were such that those that love this man could peacefully send him on his way, that would be great.
There's talk that Planned Parenthood might be defunded. How do you feel about that?
Terrible, because they do not provide federal funds for any abortions. It's a big lie that the right wing has promoted.
There's talk that Planned Parenthood might be defunded of federal tax dollars. How would you feel about that?
Furious.
Not very good.
I'm terrified and horrified at the thought.
I would not like that a bit.
What would your reaction be if you heard that Planned Parenthood was defunded?
I'd be excited. I'd be happy. I mean, There's nothing greater than that.
Joy. I'd be happy.
I'd be glad.
I'd be elated, actually.
My name is Abby Johnson, and I ran a Planned Parenthood clinic for 8 years. I was an abortion clinic director and ended up leaving in 2009 and have been speaking out ever since about the corruption inside the abortion industry, what's taking place, and have been standing up for the rights of children, but also the rights of these women, because women deserve better than anything they receive inside of an abortion clinic.
You're in a hostile environment. How is it going so far?
We've been here all day, and everything was fine, but now that there's sort of a group of us, clearly they're feeling threatened. I just got shoved into the street. It's sort of mayhem now.
I'm just angry about it. They shouldn't be here. This is for women's rights. This isn't for, going backwards in time.
No, they don't belong here. I mean, everyone has their choice.
I honestly think they are brainwashed. I don't think that they understand what it's like to be a woman. They obviously have misinformation or something wrong with them, honestly.
I'm just here to state my beliefs and be a voice as a woman who should be included in a women's march. But they're silencing us, which is completely the antithesis of what this march is supposed to be about.
My body, my choice!
Her body, her choice!
Did you see any pro-life people here screaming or yelling obscenities at anybody?
No, I haven't. Everyone's been super positive, and we're just happy to be here and express our freedom of speech. And everyone's just excited to, voice our views and opinions about the issue at hand.